All right, everybody. We are here today with the man himself. We have the master blender for Redbreast, Mr. Dave McCabe. Thank you so much, sir, for coming on the show and talking some good Irish whiskey with us today.
Jesse, no trouble at all. Glad to be here.
I'm super excited to talk to you as we have been expanding from the bourbon hemisphere. We are getting into more spirits, to more international whiskeys, and I have always had an affinity for Irish whiskey, and you, sir, are the master blender for my favorite Irish whiskey brand. I don't want to blow smoke up top, but I got to get that mark out of the way at the beginning so that we can get into the history of Redbreast. Thank you so much for joining. How you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks very much. Nice sunny day here in Cork where we're based, so can't complain.
Sun in Ireland. You need to be just ecstatic today.
Oh yeah, it's long overdue.
If you don't mind, let's get started with the history. I mean, Redbreast has roots going all the way back to the 1800s. Give me a little bit of the origin story that shapes Redbreast and the brand as it exists today.
Sure. It's a good place to start. When you think of Irish whiskey historically, like you mentioned, Jesse, in the 1800s, it wasn't always the distillery that produced the spirit were the final bottled producers of the whiskey. What you had were two other groups essentially. You had whiskey bonders who would take spirit from different distilleries and bottle it on their behalf. And that was a very common practice in the early days. But you also had wine merchants, which were kind of wine families based in Ireland who would import barrels of wine to sell. And once the wine was emptied, it was a very natural progression for those barrels to then be sent to distilleries to be filled with spirit, brought back to the wine merchants, and then aged there, where they would then make their own whiskey expression. And that's how Redbreast actually began. It was a family, W&A Gilby, and they were in the wine business. And they were then naturally sending these empty wine casks to the likes of the Jameson distillery, which originally was in Dublin. But they would take those casks back then and let them mature on their site, and were creating their own expressions of whiskies. And in the early days, there was certain names that wasn't Redbreast. It was Castle Grand Irish Whiskey, but they were always very quick to call out where they sourced the whiskey from. So in the very original labels, you would have, Castle Grand Irish Whiskey, JJ&S, and that would say John Jameson and Son. But it was in 1912 that the name Redbreast then first appeared on the bottle. And the old story of how that name came about, it's kind of a funny one, but the chairman at the time of Gilby's was a member of the Gilby family himself, but he was apparently a big bird watching fan, a big ornithologist, and he wanted to name three whiskies after three birds. And I think maybe the rest of the committee just said, you can name one whiskey after one bird and be done with it. And the Robin Redbreast got the call up. So since 1912, there's been a bottle of Redbreast on the shelf somewhere around the world. But kind of in the 70s, distilleries stopped selling bulk whiskey to the likes of the bonders and the wine merchants, and they were beginning to bottle it in-house themselves. So Redbreast continued then for a period of time up until around maybe the early 90s. But since the 70s, they weren't getting any more whiskey from the distillery, so they were selling what they had. And by the early 90s, there wasn't much Redbreast left being bottled. So there was a gap of maybe 9 or 10 years where there was none produced. But then eventually Irish Distillers, which is the overriding distillery that I'm here in, uh, pretty much took up the mantle and continued making the brand from there on in. So, from a flavor point of view, even with the Redbreast that we make today for most of the range, we always pay huge tribute to that history by really having a good wine cask influence in the maturation process for Redbreast still today.
So the 70s, Irish whiskey experienced the same thing that every Scotch and bourbon, everybody had that same slowdown period in the 70s. Um, What do you think brought that back? Because the reemergence of whiskey on the global scene, it is all attributed back to the 90s. It's all about, I feel like people got tired of the blue vodka drinks that they were getting everywhere. But what helped bring Irish whiskey back to the forefront? And I'm alley-ooping it to you because I know Redbreast had a huge part in the resurgence of Irish whiskey as a category.
That's right. I mean, again, historically, Irish whiskey was probably one of the biggest selling whiskeys on the world stage. And when you look at all the events that happened around the world, there was world wars, there was prohibition, there was trade wars with ourselves and other countries that it just led to a huge decline in Irish whiskey. And as you said, the 70s weren't particularly easy. But kind of 90s and the early 2000s, there was definitely a resurgence. And I think people had moved on, as you said, within the spirits world and looking for things that maybe their previous generation weren't big on, but the generation before them, maybe, it's quite cyclical that way. But a lot of Irish whiskey at that time and a lot of Scotch, you could probably agree with, were mostly blended Irish whiskies and Scotch whiskies at the time. And there was a small pocket of interest that began to grow, particularly with single malts, but also a very small pocket of interest on what we make here in Middleton, which is single pot still whiskey. It's very similar to anyone who doesn't know much about it. It's a very similar style of whiskey to single malt, but there's one difference in the early part of the process that changes its category, and that's where we use two types of barley. So think of a single malt as whiskey where you take in barley and you malt the entire batch of your barley, and that releases the sugars for fermentation and it goes on to be distilled in pots. Whereas in Ireland, what we do is we take in our barley, half, well, not half, but a little bit less than half would be malted, but we leave the remainder unmalted and then we combine the two together. So that then goes through pot still distillation, and what comes out after three distillations is pot still whiskey. And then that's a tradition in Ireland that goes back to the late 17, early 1800s as well, or even a bit later than that. So it's a category that many people mightn't be too familiar with, but it began to grow in huge popularity kind of around that period of time. And the only two pot still whiskies we were making was Redbreast 12 and Green Spot. And there became a kind of an objective to expand the range of pot stills that we make, and we continue right into making a 15, a Redbreast 12 cask strength, a Lustow at 21, at 27, more recently an 18, and a few nice limited editions in between. And it's just grown from strength to strength that we're in a very lucky position now that pot still whiskey seems to have regained its place on the world stage. Still a lot of work to do, but we're definitely moving in the right direction still, I think.
Well, it's interesting because the consumer seemed to, as we've both said, they got tired. It's generational, cyclical. I think the whole thing makes perfect sense because one generation got tired of what they had seen the previous drinking, and then the boom that we're in right now is people got tired of the neon blue drinks that came with a headache the next day, and it was almost that return to, like, restaurants saw it with a farm to table mentality where people got tired of the overly produced food that they were eating and went back to a more uh, flavor forward, not too many bells and whistles attached. And I think with the brands that have really had an impact in the past 20 years, Redbreast included, you're getting that. It's just good whiskey prepared properly and not you know what I mean? True to the spirit that is it's representing. And I think the general consumer has identified with that. And you saw it in bourbon as well, like the cask strengths and the non-blends. Because I think everybody had that same mentality where, like, bourbon anyway, I can't speak for Irish whiskey. It was almost like in the 70s and 80s when interest was low, they were blending the flavor out of it, trying to create something that could compete with the neutrality of vodka. And in doing so, they alienated their base and they failed to entice new consumers on. So it wasn't until that return to form where they started like, okay, that's not working. Let's go full flavor, full body, back to the beginning, and give people a core product that is just badass and hits every angle of what the palate's looking for when it comes to the category. And Irish whiskey is still like every when you, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you, because I've got people coming to me asking me to recommend whiskeys outside of the bourbon space, and I go with what I like and I go with what people recommend, and Redbreast has been at the forefront of that since the resurgence.
Yeah. And I think as well, in the last, decade or so, people want to know more about what they're consuming when it's food or drinks. And I remember in my early days, I'm here now 16 years, but in my very early days here, I helped set up a school on the distillery site called the Irish Whiskey Academy. And the idea was that it was almost like a marketing tool, but through just pure education on what we do. So whether it was our own staff going through the school or actually bartenders, whiskey writers, and journalists. And I couldn't get over the in-depth types of questions people were asking that we were never expecting would be part of the class, that, yeast types, barley varieties, the temperature of the water for steeping your barley right through to distillation, that they wanted to know every inch of information that was possible to really get a sense of what they were drinking and all the effort and detail that goes into making it. And never mind 12 years of aging in a barrel after the process of distilling. And I think when you can highlight how much effort goes into making whiskey, whether it's bourbon, Scotch, Irish, Japanese, anywhere, people get a huge appreciation for why they like what they like so much. And it just definitely adds to it as well.
I think the education is the sustainability for interest in the brands. You've got people now, like you mentioned a moment ago, you've got cask strength, you've got your LTOs, you've got 12, you've got 15, you've got 18, you've got 27. Like years ago, when the consumer wasn't as well informed, they knew the thing that they liked and they never expanded from that, either from brand loyalty or they'd been burned in the past when they looked beyond what they liked. And now they understand a little more. They're coming to you with those questions regarding what type of barley and what temperature the water is and all of the things. And then when they drink it, they identify with it more and it resonates with them. And now it is a part of what they see themselves as a whiskey connoisseur or a steward of whichever brand they like, you know. I had a question from a moment ago when you were talking about the barley and the malted barley. What I know it's the way it's always been done, but what do you think led to that? Scotch single. It's all malted barley. With the Irish whiskey, what was the original not even thought process, because we're talking hundreds of years ago, but what is the purpose behind using the two separate barleys or style
That's a
of
really good
barleys?
question. Yeah. I suppose you go back beyond when we started doing it, that all whiskey in Ireland was typically all all malted cereal. But in the 1800s, the government at the time, which was the government for Ireland and Great Britain as well, they understood that to create alcohol, whether for whiskey making or brewing, you have to malt your cereal to essentially create the sugar to create the alcohol. So they came up with the idea of putting a tax on malt. And of course, the Irish, being Irish, said, well, how do we avoid paying all this tax without
I love it.
necessarily breaking the law? And the use of unmalted, essentially tax-free barley in the early 1800s became part of the mash bill. And that tax actually quickly dropped again by the wayside, really soon after it was brought out. But the fact that distillers had started to use the unmalted barley in the mash bill, it actually changed the flavor profile of the spirit that distilleries kept on actually using the combination of the malted and the unmalted barley and continue right through in the case of where I am in Middleton, and some distilleries in Dublin as well. And in terms of flavor, I suppose, if you think for us, what we find the inclusion of the unmalted barley is considered to create more of what we call like a creamy mouth coating texture to the whiskey with a small bit of an elevated spice at the same time. So from a flavor point of view, it's something that we've just never really moved away from when it comes to making whiskey. We also make grain whiskey as well, and maybe the odd year we've done a small bit of malt, but pot still is really the heart of what we do. And yeah, it's something very traditional in Ireland, and we still do it today.
I think that's another one of the things that leads to like this romanticism around spirit distilling in general. Like there's that little bit of punk rock when it comes to why do we do that? Because the government was coming down on us and we figured out a pivot that was both like worked out well for the whiskey and was also sort of the stone cold salute to the government at the same time. I absolutely love that. And you've seen it in every category where at some point the government comes with their hands out and the industry's just like, here, one for you, one for me. We're not giving you both.
Necessity is the mother of invention, as they say, you know.
That's right. That's exactly right. So once you get through and it resurges uh, with the lapse and it now being in house, what were some of the uh, were you re-standing up like when you brought it back to market, how did you recapture that initial? You were running out, you had to create more. How did you create the through line between what people knew Redbreast was and what Redbreast is now, and from a quality and taste standpoint?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question, Jesse, and that's something that is always very hard to do because there's so many moving parts and different elements in the past and the present. So when you think about the original Redbreast, it was a wine merchant using their old wine barrels, and they were using spirit from a distillery with the Jameson original distillery in Dublin. So, taking that piece of knowledge and then you're now bringing back out the brand, and it's from the Middleton distillery with its own wood program. It's, it was a very difficult transition. And I don't think anyone who would be very, understanding of it would think that you're trying to match exactly like for like the old and the new, because it would be impossible. Every distillery is like someone's fingerprint,
As you say, fingerprint.
Yeah. So I think the best you can do in that situation is recognize the history and the legacy of the brand, create your own expression that pays tribute to it, understanding the history, the love for the brand, but having to do it in a way that represents, I suppose, who we are, that have taken over the mantle, kind of like in a relay race, passing over the baton, if you will. So, you know, when you think of wine barrels coming in historically full of wine, like that's not the case anymore as well. So, wine comes over to Ireland in bottle rather than barrels. So what we do to pay, I suppose, tribute to the history and maintain that tradition is we actually go to Spain and we actually get wine casks made specifically for us to then be seasoned with Oloroso sherry, which was one of the main styles of wine that the W&A Gilby merchants used to use for aging. So we work with the family of, they're a cooperage family and winemaking family, the Paez family in Jerez in the south of Spain. And essentially what they do is they'll make barrels for us bespoke. They'll air dry the wood for maybe a year and a half. They turn those stacks into casks and they'll toast them. And then they'll age Oloroso sherry in them for 2 years, seasoning. And then we get them over and we'll fill them. But we have a very kind of, I suppose, long-standing use of American bourbon casks as well, bourbon barrels. And that's a very big constant in the kind of portfolio of whiskeys that we make as well. So the idea with Redbreast is it's pot still whiskey. aged in a combination of bourbon casks and sherry. But when you compare Redbreast to other brands that we make, it has one of the biggest sherry cask proportions in the mix. And that's still trying to create the link to the old ways of using wine barrels. So when you think of flavor with Redbreast, for 12-year-olds particularly, we're trying to elevate the dried fruits, sultanas, raisins, the wood gives you that nice bit of vanilla, the bourbon cask. And when you round all those together, we kind of call it a Christmas cake type of character. So I suppose to go back to the very start of your question, we were never trying to replicate the old way. We were trying to make it in our way, but reflective of its past and not forgetting that at the same time, if that makes sense.
No, it's a beautiful answer because so many brands, that is almost a hiccup that so many brands get trapped in, where it's an evolution of the brand. It's not a, you can't go backwards. You have to move forward. And when you're able to pinpoint what made it special and then put that through the lens of modern day production and whiskey making, that's where you excel, where you're able to take the advances and apply that to what was already a great beginning. That is how you get into the next generation being interested in this. That's a beautiful answer. Does it ever from a Irish whiskey or from an international whiskey viewpoint, does it ever seem odd to you that it took American whiskey so long to embrace second barrel maturation? Like forever, American whiskey almost kept their like stubborn, like, no, one brand new American oak barrel, done. And everybody everywhere else forever has been like, no, you can pull out these great flavors from all these other barrel types, and we're just now in the past 15 years really. And you know what it was like, someone somewhere saw, oh, people love this and are buying a lot of them, and then all of a sudden all of that, like, no, it's fine, it's all part, it's all good now, let's go. Does that ever surprise other markets that it took us this long to recognize that?
Um, I suppose you could say it's surprising in one way, but it's been amazing that you haven't copped onto it sooner because it's been great for us to be able to get those barrels and use them ourselves. That even in the 60s, we got them for free at the start. That was when we first got American barrels in, and they came in what were called shucks. They came in into Middleton disassembled, and we would have coopers on site reassembling them. And then from the 80s onwards, we were getting them in fully standing, as they say, made from the day they were first made, and we were using them. But I suppose why we're so grateful for them from a flavor point of view is they won't give you as much as they do the first time around, as you well know. But, for us particularly, we distill our spirit 3 times. And, to move the marketing language out of it, when you distill something 3 times, it is going to be a little bit more on the elegant, probably lighter side than something that's distilled once or twice. So making sure you have a right balance of that spirit type going into the right balance of oak is very important. So what we would call a first fill bourbon barrel, which is ex bourbon that we're using for the first time, is a really good balance for us with the right kind of influence of oak to meet the expectations of this type of spirit we make. But then we can dial that up or down by reusing those barrels a second time. Or we do buy in on a very small scale virgin oak American barrels as well. So depending on the brand I'm working on, if I want to create an additional wood influence, I'll start playing in some of the virgin oak aged whiskies. If I want to make a whiskey where, like Powers John's Lane, where I try and make it a bit more spicy and bold than Redbreast, I reduce the amount of first fill bourbon and I use more second fill. So even though it's 12 years of age as well, the spirit hasn't been as impacted on by the oak as much as a first fill bourbon would. So it's the best thing to get barrels from yourselves that have been used already, that if you're now using them as well, it probably just brings up the overall price, I suppose, of them.
Uh, Such a beautiful chess match, though, that you're playing with the whiskey as you take it from where it starts to where it needs to go. And that's also the best and the most refined answer I've heard to the triple distillation process is that every time it goes through, you're refining it, and I can't even repeat what you said as good as you said it the first time. That was just like the perfect answer, because that's always the question, right? Why three times through? But that makes perfect sense.
Mhm.
So after you go through the ingredients used and the production methods and the maturation, like the final product, uh, for someone brand new to Redbreast, like what's the first thing? Like we've got all this history. We now know the products that went into it. You know that it's been triple distilled. What is the first thing that you want someone to recognize or think or experience when they pop that first bottle of Redbreast and pour a big pour?
The first thing I suppose would be, I suppose, on the nose. You know, nosing this whiskey, you're going to get almost kind of like this edible type of characteristic of aroma, which is what I consider like dried fruits, as I mentioned with sultanas raisins, but also like a nutty character, almost like almonds or marzipan. And a lot of that's attributable to that Oloroso seasoned cask, where it's like a semi-dry type of wine, which is quite nutty, quite dried fruits. And I think that's a very prevalent aroma that you'd initially get on the nose of Redbreast. But I suppose to get under the bonnet a little bit more from a distillation point of view, we're a bit quite complex in the sense that when it comes to distillation on the pot still side of our still house, we make three styles of pot still spirit. Um, and we refer to them kind of internally as light, medium, and heavy. So during the distillation process, how the distillers work the duration of the distillations, temperature, the rate of reflux, and the cuts, we can make those three different styles. And when it comes to the Redbreast range, for most of it, we're taking the light distillate that's aged in bourbon casks and sherry, and we're also taking the medium style distillate that's aged in bourbon, and we're marrying them together after the 12 years of aging. So we're mixing styles of distillate character as well as styles of casks after 12 years of age. But I think on the initial sip, you're going to, or nose, that Oloroso sherry cask character is going to be prominent. But on the palate, then you'll get this kind of oily, creamy texture, a little bit of sweetness in there, but some tannin from that European oak as well. In a nice balance, but a nice long finish with a luscious kind of coating at the same time. That's how I would describe it if I was doing a tasting with a masterclass, or even just someone um, in the local shop if you're doing a tasting with them.
I always love to ask that before we get to the actual tasting, because I think people, when they approach a new whiskey, there's some hesitation, or there's a little bit of anxiety, especially if they're imbibing with a group of people where they want to have it's like a pre-read, right? Like you want to do a little bit of homework if you want to do homework. I mean, nobody wants to do homework when they're thinking of whiskey, but your brain does want that kind of level setting if it's something you've never had before, so that you know what to expect, especially if you're brand new to a category and it I've done a bunch of tastings. I know you've done a bunch of tastings. People don't know what they don't know, and they want to be seen as part of the community. Like they don't want to be seen as like left out in the cold when it comes to that group mentality. So I always like to ask that, just because it gives people kind of a it warms up the oven a little bit before we get into some of these delicious whiskeys.
Yeah, I think you are kind of managing expectation, um, and you're giving your own subjective opinion as well without telling them what they should be getting. You know, I always think it's kind of, this is what you might find, this is what I find. Hope you like it, and let me know if there's something else jumping out at you. That's the way I always would want to approach it as well.
Oh, 100%. I think that's the fun, is letting people know they're not wrong. Like
Yeah.
whatever you get, like you're gonna probably tell me this and you're probably gonna tell me that. And on top of that, that's your palate. Like we were talking fingerprints a moment ago. There's also everybody's palate is its own fingerprint, and whatever you get, that's you. Now there could be factors that go into that, like you had garlic toast for breakfast. Well, that's probably going to play a role in how you experience a spirit for the first time. You had a super acidic tomato sauce or whatever, it's gonna be things that affect the palate, but overall, the way that your fingerprint works is going to be just fine, and you shouldn't feel bad about whatever flavor profile you get. Uh, but listening to you
Absolutely.
talk about it, I mean, your background is just like you're so tuned in to this the spirit. How did you get into Irish whiskey? Like, what is your path from where you started to where you are right now as master blender?
Yeah, I started here in 2010, and it was originally just a summer job in our kind of brand home, which is just over the wall from where I am now. And as I mentioned, that Irish whiskey school, so I got involved in helping to build that around 2012. Um, and during that time, when it's a school, you kind of have your classroom setting and you have your different modules, so raw materials, and then I bring them up to where the barley comes in, and then distillation, I'd bring them to the still house and maturation to a warehouse. But we would do some kind of blending classes and things like that as well. But if ever our master blender at the time, Billy Lighton, was ever on site and I knew it, I'd ask him if he was around to come down and give a quick talk on blending. And I suppose from there we kind of hit it off that around 2014, when I was still in the academy, he actually offered to bring me to Spain on one of his trips to the cooperages there to meet the wine producers and the cask, the coopers as well. And from there, I just learned a bit more and more each time. I got to go to certain whiskey events like, Whiskey Live, Paris Whiskey Show, London, stuff like that. And in around 2015, 16, he approached me saying if I'd be willing to work under him as a kind of like an apprentice. So started that around 2016, and it was a year kind of apprenticeship in terms of I wasn't even given the title blender. It was I think it was process technologist was the term, and the idea was to work with him for a year and see how he got on with me and vice versa. And if it worked out, he'd keep me on. If not, I'm sure there was somewhere else in the distillery they might have put me in. But no, it worked out very well. So I was blending with him since then, really up until 2023 when he retired, and I took over from him. But he's retired in the production sense, but he's very much involved from a ambassadorial role and things like that still. So it was just the two of us till about 2020, I think, and we took on another blender, Deirdre, who was working in the spirit store with regards cask fillings and emptings. And then from there, we took on another blender, Brona, who came in the same direction as Deirdre. So there's three of us now working away in the small blending team, but we essentially cover everything from Jameson, Redbreast, the Spots, Middleton, Powers, just to name a few. So it's all sensory, but it's all inventory management as well. So, but Billy was in the business about 40 odd years before he finished up. So if there's someone you're going to learn from, he was the one and only, to be honest.
Hey, if you're going to apprentice under the best, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, from what you learned from him, how do you approach, like when you're standing up either a new whiskey or an existing whiskey? Like, what are your first steps to standing up that expression, and what are you looking for as you put together the pieces needed for a Redbreast 12 or an LTO? I think that's the main thing that interests me because you've got to be good at both, right? You need the consistency of the flagship, but then how do you create the standalones?
Yeah. It's very much a two-pronged approach depending on which one you're thinking about. So if you think of Redbreast 12, it's all about consistency and managing our inventory for really long periods of time to make sure that everything's aging in the right cask type and in the right spirit profile, that when it comes to the point of bottling, you have enough liquid available to meet the demand in that year, in accordance to the right formulation. So much so from a planning point of view that we actually work out probably 40 years in advance from a planning model as to the way the forecasts are going to go. It's crystal ball stuff, obviously, after maybe the first 5 years, but you always need to have a plan. So, for example, the the inventory we have now that's maybe 11 years of age, I'll have made sure that I have enough volume for next year's Redbreast 12 that the markets are telling me is the demand. But not only that, I have to make sure that it's in the right split of cask types as per the formula for Redbreast. And if you go right back to more younger whiskey, that's maybe 4 or 5 years of age now, I need to know what's the demand for that in 8 years' time when it's going to be 12 for Redbreast 12. And then I need to go, is it all in the right mix, or is there any adjustments that I'll have to worry about before it gets to 12? So an example might be we filled whiskey 2 years ago into bourbon and sherry, but maybe what we're seeing now in 10 years' time, based on the information we're getting from the different markets, is that Redbreast is really growing in certain particular markets. And I'll see, okay, maybe we haven't filled enough spirit into sherry to match that demand in the future. So what I might have to do is readjust by recasking some bourbon aged whiskey that's maybe 1 year or 2 years of age now into sherry to supplement that inventory. So in 10 years' time, I'll have a 12-year-old whiskey that has enough sherry influence to add to what I already need. And it's always about consistency. So we get a schedule in every week for bottling, and it might be every 3 or 4 weeks, Redbreast 12 comes up, and the volume they need is different every time. So what would happen is myself or Brona, who's here as well, we calculate how many barrels do we need to empty to make that batch of Redbreast. So we calculate all that. We then send a kind of a request to the warehouse team. They'll go and sample every cask and give us small little 71 ml bottles of each barrel type, knows them all, approve them, make a little batch, and compare it to the batch we previously made to make sure it's all within the same kind of 95% of our target as we'd probably put in our minds, and we sign off on that. So when it comes to something that's ongoing, it's always about consistency and managing stock for the future. But then you get the exciting kind of one-offs, as you say, LTOs and things like that. So the first thing is to be very mindful of what brand is it. Okay, it's Redbreast. So I know there's certain stocks of whiskey or cask types that you would never in your wildest imagination ever use for a Redbreast, because the people who enjoy and love Redbreast would be totally surprised if you were to do this, because it wouldn't match the traditions and the style of that brand. So you know very quickly what will work and won't work, but then you're trying to do something that's unique as well. So for example, the one we're going to look at today as the limited edition Iberian offering is where we work with different winemakers around Spain and Portugal, and we see what they're making. And there's some very interesting styles of wine out there. So we might say, look, if we give you some of our barrels to season with your wine and we'll take them back, you know, let's work on that. So we might do that, and I'll make a batch of a Redbreast style of whiskey and then finish it in a style of barrel that I know would match the kind of flavor profile of the family of Redbreast, but still have its own unique character. So you're always bearing in mind, will the flavors match the brand, but also will I manage the consumer's expectation if they open this bottle to go, yeah, that's definitely a Redbreast, but another member of the family, if that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense. And you said a couple things there that I just absolutely am enamored by. Uh, One, I love that you said staying true to the brand and not picking the wrong cask for the Redbreast consumer. I love there being, or not just me. I think in general there needs to be the through line to the brand people are drinking when you do some of the more experimental fillings. Just because if you get it home and you're expecting Redbreast and it's such a stark departure that you're surprised, then you've not sold three bottles, you've sold one. I just it's such a smart approach, and we're still learning, right? Like I think across the breadth of American whiskey right now, you see people where core expression does super well, and then when they do that LTO, it's like such a right turn that it doesn't do well, and people are surprised by it. I think that mentality needs to be, and it is. I'm not saying it's not adopted across our space. I'm just saying that is the correct way to think it through for when you're doing your LTOs, because at the end of the day, you bought a Redbreast, you want it to be a different kind than you're used to, but you still want the through line of Redbreast. I just love that. Uh, and then when you were talking about your flagships and making sure the consistency's there, you were saying when you've got maybe you need more that's been in the second fin or the first or second fill of bourbon cask, and you got to move it over to a wine. How do you make that pivot if it's more than that? Like if it's not just for volume, but let's say something's not progressing the way you want it to, and nothing gets thrown away in whiskey. How do you right the ship as you're blending, as it's maturing, so that if it's not where you need it to be, you can add what it needs to happen to get it to that 10-year mark, like you were saying? Like how is that just how do you plan for that?
Yeah, like we've been kind of lucky that we're always conservative, I think, with regards future demand for our premium whiskey. So we've never left ourselves. We've been conservative, but always adding a bit more into the inventory than you imagined you needed. But we've never overshot the mark too much to be concerned that we were heavy on one type of barrel and light on the other. So we've been lucky that we've never had to make any major adjustments, because if you do, you make them as early in the whiskey's life as possible. Um, but I suppose another trick I do, I don't know if I'm divulging too much here, but when it comes to certain brands and the volumes are small, what I'll do is when I'm making a batch for the bottling, I'll make actually a little bit more than I need, and then I recask the difference back into old barrels, maybe bourbon barrels in their fourth use. And I call them kind of marrying barrels. And what I'm doing is, again, just using Redbreast 12 as an example, if I make a bit more than I need for bottling and I put the rest or the difference back into old barrels, I'm not really aging that whiskey more for flavor. I'm just letting it marry and sit there. And when it comes to making the next batch of Redbreast, I might use a few of those barrels in my formula for the next batch. So then I'm effectively mixing some of the old batch with the new. And that's also a way to maintain consistency and a link in every batch of Redbreast you do. So at least if you ever have to make any little tweaks, you're always adding some of the old previous batch that you've made, and that helps again with consistency, which is very important for me, because when I'm making a whiskey, it's not for the next new customer, it's for the existing customers who are the ones buying it, and probably the ones who are promoting it on your behalf to the non-whiskey or non-Redbreast drinker as well. So for me, that's flavor is key.
Oh, fantastic answer. And you're 100% correct, because your consumer is a tried and true, like the Redbreast drinker is waving the flag. That's how I found out. Like everybody goes through their evolution of what they like, and all it takes is that whiskey big brother to be like, "All right, you like that? Try this." And then boom, you're like, "That's where we go." That is it's like it sounds like the best job ever. Like it sounds like all the checks and balances that you would have with a regular job, only instead of you doing anything else, it's with whiskey. Like it just sounds like at the end of a hard day, it's still whiskey. If you, oh man, I've put in 12 hours today. Yeah, but it was with whiskey. You didn't have a PowerPoint going through your day. It was like I'm jealous of the guy that gets to go and pull out the milliliters and yeah, okay, that's good, that's good, that's good, that's good, check, thumbs up, punch out, go home, open another bottle of Redbreast. It sounds like a good job to me.
Yeah, I definitely can't complain. When you do have your hard days, as you said, you have to just reset your gratitude button and realize what you're doing and how fun it is at the same time. And every challenge is it is a luxury product at the same time. And you must remember that it's just something to be enjoyed. We are very much take what we do seriously in the making, as we say, but we want to make something that we enjoy, and issues about managing your inventory and everything. It's all really interesting, I must say.
Oh, I can only imagine. And just having all of these tools at your disposal so that you're set up to just create the best freaking whiskey possible. I I'm excited for you to go to work now. Like and gratitude is the correct word there, because I am extremely grateful that you've come on today and walked us through so much of the Redbreast process and history. And we've teased the people. How would you like now to maybe have a couple drinks with me?
Sure, I'd love to.
I think today we are going to be drinking through the Redbreast 12, the Redbreast 15, and I'm excited about the LT. I don't want to keep calling it an LTO, but I am very excited about the Moscatel that we're going to be drinking through as well. If I pronounce that wrong, just let me know, because all of the different wine barrels I've just given up, and I just know what my flavor palette looks for, and it sounds delicious.
No, happy days. I have them poured here as well with me. So we can kick off with the 12 if you like.
Yes, Redbreast 12 year. I think this is what the majority of people, when they find the brand, this is where they go first. And I'm sitting here drinking Redbreast 12 with the master blender, Dave McCabe from Redbreast. You said happy day. I'll second that. Let's get going. Let's dive in.
Sure. So I suppose just to recap a little on this one, think of pot still whiskey, which is your malted, unmalted barley, triple distilled, and then aged in a combination of first fill American bourbon barrels, but also first fill Oloroso sherry casks. It's at 40% or 80 proof, as you'd say. So if you want to give it a nose and see what you think, but
Oh, just that fruit forward all day long. Just, oh my, like even the nose, it like if you could smell velvety, it feels like the nose is velvety.
yeah, if you think of shapes or anything, this wouldn't have any sharp edges to it, I suppose, is a way of looking at it. But you're definitely right there with the fruit, dried fruits, sultanas, raisins, but also just this little kind of nutty character to it in the back. Um, I think of almond, or as I said, marzipan as well, and a little bit of spice as well. So nothing too one-dimensional, that there's a kind of you're you're jumping in and out of flavors there, weaving through them to a degree, rather than one thing being totally one-dimensional, which is quite nice about it.
I think when people find Irish whiskey, this is why they're immediately taken by it. And you have so many people just flock to it as soon as the palate recognizes everything that it brings to the table. It has that approachability, but it still has that volumatic nuance of flavor where when you get into it, you're like, oh, and then there's this, and then there's this. It's just such a fun frickin' pour. And I'm diving in. I've sat here looking at it for 45 minutes. Cheers.
Cheers.
Oh, just absolutely splendid.
Again, even as I'm talking now, there's this kind of mouth-watering character to it,
Right?
luscious, oily, creamy, if you want, textured. You have a little small prickle of spice, but nothing that would be too initial. It's more towards the back, and nice gentle tannin, kind of nutty character as well. But still, there's that lingering oils I find coming through.
The mouth feel is my absolute favorite part, aside from, of course, the flavor notes that you get as soon as it hits the palate. Like it really, every piece of it carries with it pieces of flavor, and it's not leaving any part of the mouth alone. Like you're getting the sides of the tongue, you're getting the back of the palate, and then that beautiful oily right at the mid to the front where that sweet pops out. I mean, sweet lord, it is just it I'm immediately relaxed. It is one of those sit down and enjoy whiskeys. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, you wouldn't rush this, as we'd say.
Well, and the finish too, like as it opens up on your palate from sip one to sip two, that fruit is popping, and it still has the viscosity of that oil kind of like layering the tongue. and taking it on, and then the nutty. Oh man,
And I think as well, we're using two oak types as well, American oak, but also European. And when you think of American oak, as you know, like be kind of nice lactones, kind of a buttery nature to it. And then the European oak is kind of contrasting to a degree because it has a higher level of tannin that you extract in the whiskey. So you're getting a nice balance of oak where a generous wave of this kind of buttery lactone style that meets this more almost like a red wine or dark chocolate type of tannin character, but they're not fighting each other either at the same time.
they sort of fold into one another. Like a seesaw, you get a little bit of one, and then it lends to the next,
Yeah.
and then as it works the mouth, you get it back. It's a handshake, right? Like the whole thing's working together in unison.
And just a little fact, I don't know if this would bore your listeners or not, but in Spain, they would mostly use American oak in the wine, in the sherry industry. But historically, when they were transporting their wine to Ireland and other countries, they wouldn't use their American oak casks. They would use their own locally produced Spanish oak barrels for shipping. So that's the type of barrel that Irish whiskey was then aged in. So when we get our barrels made today in Spain, we still get them made from European oak rather than American oak for that same reason. And that's all part of the flavor that you're seeing today.
Oh, I love it. It's all about the blueprint, right? And how as you dig deeper into it, you see the complexity that went into making it and into the maturation process, and all of that comes through in the palate. Like it's
Yeah.
what keeps it from being. It's what makes it so interesting, right? It's what keeps it from being one note and expands into like it's still the finish is you don't have what the Kentucky hug. Instead of the Kentucky hug, you've got like almost this wonderful back and forth between finish and palate where it's opening up more notes the longer you sit with it, and some of that spice and some of that nuttiness keeps coming through as it plays with the fruit that's sitting on your mid palate. It is, good lord, you just want to sit down and drink it. You just want to sit down and enjoy it. If you can't tell, I'm a fan. Mm.
And we do a cask strength version of this, and it's literally the same recipe, same formula. We just make it once a year and we leave it at the natural strength. So sometimes we made it twice, but it's generally once, but it'll be up maybe at 57, between 57 and 59%.
Ding, ding,
That is just
ding.
natural strength, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a nice cult following behind that one as well, but it's the same recipe just for people to know.
I think it's important when people go cask strength that they understand that both sides of that coin have unique personalities. Like on the bourbon side, I was talking to a whiskey maker out of Virginia, and her and I are drinking 80 proof bourbon, and it had just as much flavor as some of the hazmat stuff that we drank through after the fact. And that is where the artistry lies, right? Like the
Yeah.
fact that you're able to pack that much flavor into the 80 proof pot still 12 year is just a testament to the brand and everything that has gone into what we've talked about so far that found its way into this glass.
Yeah, absolutely. It's for that strength, it's very flavorsome for sure.
Good Lord, if this is where we are starting, I've never had the LTO, and of course the 15 year is a hallmark on most Irish whiskey drinkers' shelves. So, what should people be looking for as we get ready to pop into the 15-year Redbreast? What is the biggest difference people should be on the lookout for between 12 and 15?
The one of the biggest differences is how we age it. So not only is it older, it's a different tweak to the formula as well. Again, it's the malted, unmalted barley. And again, it's triple distilled. And again, it's using those two different types of distillates out of the three that we make. When it comes to Redbreast 12, think of all the barrels we're using. They're in their first use in Middleton after they've held bourbon or sherry. When it comes to Redbreast 15, we're actually using a combination of American bourbon barrels, of which some are in their first juice by us, but some are actually in their second juice as well. And same on the sherry side. And as you know, the more you reuse the same barrel, the less the barrel will give in terms of oak contribution. So if you want to create something like Redbreast 15, which has slightly more of a distillate character with peeling back the oak to a small degree versus Redbreast 12, you might find there's more heightened sense of that herbal nature with a bit more of a citrus character from the distillate, peeled back on the dried fruits and the oak, but still a little sweet at the same time. It's at 92 proof of 46%, so it'll have elevated spice on the palate as well. So it's kind of like, I won't say it's it's important to bear in mind it's not just an older version of the 12. It's older, but we've adjusted the cask profile to shine through the distillate a bit more in this version. Is probably the best way to say it.
I love the explanation too that the more you use them, the more that the less of that oak comes through. So you are getting the distillate forward. Uh, you can tell from the nose immediately, as there's hints of that citrus poking through. Where with the 12 year, there was more of that fruit forward nose. So that sweet is a little more pronounced, but at the same time, it is volumatic instead of overpowering. Like it's still sitting there, very balanced with everything else you have going on the palate.
Yeah, like as you say, you're seeing fruit from both sides of the coin. That maybe with the 12, you could attribute a lot of the fruit to the cask contribution. With the 15, you could attribute some of the fruit to the distillate contribution. Um, and there's a little bit elevated kind of almost pepper character on the nose as well in terms of that spice. Um,
You could live in this nose for days. Like there's so much going on here. There's also that beautiful little bit of whiskey funk, and I absolutely adore some whiskey funk. All right. Cheers.
Cheers.
Oh man, how do you pack that much flavor into? I mean, good Lord, that is absolutely delicious. 92 proof full octane is what that is right there. And everything from the sugars all the way to the hint of spice to the funk right behind it. This is this is fantastic. This is absolutely fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, I think you're still getting that little citrus character, but there's, again, elevate spice, even a little kind of menthol element to the finish of it as well. But it definitely packs a lot of flavor, as you say, for something that is just 46% as well. 46%, whereas Redbreast 12 is 40, but you can see the relationship between the two, but one is just pushing in a different direction to the other, but not extreme differences at the same time.
Well, it's like we were talking about. You want that through line there. Like you know that these two are related. Like it is the base that you like in both with different elements popping out. It's pure artistry as you see the differences between the 12 and the 15 that they each have their own personality while still leading back to the core flavor profile of the brand. I mean, it is never ceases to amaze me. Man, what would you pair this with? Like if you were, because I've got like this is there's a couple things popping into my head. Like if you were sitting down, like let's say you're doing a food pairing, like a whiskey dinner where you've got this guy on the menu along with the 12 and maybe the 18. Like what would you have to eat with this? Because I can think of a couple things that would like really pull those flavor notes out of this.
Uh, Good question. I for the 12, and I learned this from a whiskey society from Finland of all places, and they did a whiskey and chocolate blind tasting, and they paired this locally made chocolate. It's like an orange flavored chocolate, and it won in the blind tasting with Redbreast 12. And I actually still have, they were over here a few weeks ago, and I still have some of the chocolate in my drawer here. It's called Fats Arena Orange Truffle. And basically how they described trying it, and it's amazing, is to have some of the chocolate but don't finish it, and then have your little sip of Redbreast 12 over it. And that orange flavored chocolate mixing with the Redbreast 12 is definitely a match made in heaven, and I can attest to it firsthand. It's amazing. So I think anything chocolate related with Redbreast 12 definitely works. Um, Redbreast 15, I've often kind of been on occasions where it's been paired with cheese, um, simply because cheese would have, a lot of fat and texture, and this slightly elevated spicy style of Redbreast 12, 15 nicely cuts through that and kind of complements it from a converse relationship, so to speak. I've also seen it being compared to like complemented with meat, like steak and things. And if I was thinking of Redbreast 18, something dessert driven as well, dark berry fruits, anything like that would really go well with Redbreast 18 because of the style of casks that we're using in there.
It's so funny that you said the chocolate orange. I was picturing with Redbreast 12 the holiday season, those the candies that you would get with like the orange candy that are covered in chocolate. I could see that just like completely popping all of the rest of it. Uh those are, yes, and now I'm hungry on top of enjoying good whiskey because I picture like a nice smoked pork with the 15. Like I could see that
Yeah, I can see
fatty
what you mean.
protein really going with the just everything going on in that glass. Man, I don't know how we're going to top where we are right now. I am super excited now to jump into the, again, I don't know if I'm saying it correctly, but Moscatel.
Yeah, Moscatel. Yeah, that's it.
I mean,
Um,
stands on its own right there. I love too how your LTOs, you always go the extra mile to make sure that when you see it on the shelf, that this is the one. You can tell one of these things are not like the other. And when you go and you examine it a little further, you're like, okay, we got something going on here. Tell me about the Moscatel.
so it's part of what we refer to as the Iberian series, and Iberia is kind of it's a place, or it's like a region that encompasses Spain and Portugal essentially. So the Iberian Peninsula, it's kind of referred to. And when it comes to Redbreast, a lot of the influence in making Redbreast is from that region, Spanish wine casks. For Redbreast 27, we use some ruby port, things like that. So if people are familiar with Lustau, that was the first Redbreast that we linked to a series, and then we did a tawny port or a PX and then a tawny port. But to get to Redbreast Muscatel, essentially there's a winemaker in Malaga. Her name is Martha Suarez, and she's fifth generation, her and her cousin Vincent. And we met them through a cooper that we were working with, and he introduced us to Martha, and she makes all different styles of Spanish fortified wine in Malaga. And Moscatel is a style of wine from the Moscatel grape. And when we tried this wine, we just thought it is lovely. It's sweet. It has lots of citrus forward fruit character to it, floral kind of honey nature as well. So she kindly agreed to us putting some casks into the bodega there, and she filled them with Muscatel wine for 2 years, and we took them back. And what we did essentially is we made a batch of Redbreast, roughly kind of 9 to 11 years of age, and we filled those hogsheads, as they're called, type of barrel of the Muscatel wine. We filled them for 16 months and kind of monitored as it was aging. And at a point where it came that we felt it reached its optimum in terms of influence, we bottled it. And that's the latest addition to the Iberian series. So it's a limited kind of one-time offering. So again, the initial whiskeys that went into it were your pot still whiskeys, bourbon and sherry. Marry them, and that marriage of whiskeys went into these hogsheads for 16 months prior to bottling. So it's 46% as well. But on the nose, you might think of like twisted orange or kind of tangerine type of character, as the first nose for me goes.
It's so unique to the other two. Like it's absolutely like it draws you in straight off the bat. After the citrus, where did you what are you getting?
Well, what I find interesting is it's not just the wine, I think, that's driving this, is the fact that the wood itself was new and then just held wine for 2 years before we filled them. So the wood itself is quite contributing here as well. And I think of kind of like cedar wood type of character, a little bit herbal at the same time.
Okay, I've never had this before, and I was the cedar. It just sings, and it's like right underneath everything whiskey. There's just that hint of not even cedar as much as just outdoors, like that beautiful forest is coming through a little bit.
We often kind of talk of like fresh pine or things like that. In certain instances, I think I can kind of see that relation in what you're saying there with cedarwood as well. Um, but it's very important, I suppose, when we're aging wine casks, we're not just looking for the wine influence, but it's the wood itself also plays a part in the role, and that's very important. So we don't try and buy old wine casks from a bodega that has been using it in the Solera for 50 years and that there's no oak, it's just wine. We're not looking for that style. We're looking for wine and wood coming through in flavor.
So by the wine only sitting in the barrel for what did you say, 16 months?
Well, the wine was in the
Two
barrel for
years.
2 years, and then we put Redbreast into them then for 16 months afterwards.
So with like I know how whiskey will treat the barrel for the beginning. What does 2 years in a wine what does 2 years in Spanish oak do to the barrel when it's been wine for 2 years?
It does kind of two things. It's kind of there's an extractive element to it that a fresh European oak barrel, as I said, is very giving in tannin. But by putting wine into it, the wine will help extract out a lot of the tannin from the wood in the first place. But then you get the interactive reaction where the wine penetrates the wood as well. So what we're doing is when we're getting these casks back, we've we know the fact that they've been seasoned, we're going to have as much tannin, wood oils and resins as much as a new barrel would give you thanks to the wine removing it. But we're also getting the added influence of the wine that's residual within the staves at the same time. But Muscatel wine, it's a fortified wine, but it's quite sweet. What they do is when they harvest the grapes, they actually leave the grapes out in the open under the sun for a number of days, and the sun essentially evaporates and dries out all the water as much as it can out of the grape, and it just leaves the sugars behind, and then it goes into the winemaking process. So you might end up with a style of wine that's maybe 290, like for example, 290 grams of sugar in a liter of this wine. So I think any bold, sweet wines like that work really well with whiskey in terms of an influence. So I think of like sugar glazed fruits on top of what I'm getting with the citrus and the cedar. As I mentioned, like floral honey, that type of character coming through all on the nose.
Absolutely enamored by this because there's just so much goodness popping out of the glass before you even dive into it. And at the bottom of it, it's still redbreast. Like it's expanding from the base that you like, and you could. I mean, I'm a geek. I could sit here and nose this thing for 45 minutes if you let me, and just keep getting more and more out of it. So this is a solid way to end what has been a stellar flight of whiskey with you this today.
Appreciate that.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Oh yeah. The sweet comes through. I think my favorite part about this is that it is so Redbreast forward. Like it is where the others have been an intermingling of the flavors we've discussed. This one is a little more separate in that you get the Irish whiskey and then the other flavor notes fold into it. It's almost like you get a sweet mid palate and then a slightly dry left and right of the palate, and it kind of folds into one another and is freaking fantastic. Like it's just beautifully orchestrated.
Yeah, I talk about like, or I think of textured layers, as I
Mm.
like to call it. I think of, you know, sweet pear, maybe lime, but you get layers of kind of toffee, even honeycomb and vanilla. But then the wood itself, like you can kind of collectively group it as woodland spices, maybe cinnamon, nutmeg, things like that, all coming together.
Honeycomb and nutmeg all day long. Like that was the first thing I got was that textured sugar coming through, and then right after that, just that hint of like fresh nutmeg, where you've just taken and kind of really just textured the skin off with a shaver,
Absolutely, yeah.
fragrant at the
It's
same time.
very textured for sure.
Man, where can people? Okay, so if they're looking for this, when is this one hitting the shelves? Because I have a feeling these don't last very long once they hit market.
No, it's small volume. I'm not sure when it comes to the States. It might be out there already, to be perfectly honest, Jesse, because I know we launched it in Ireland a number of weeks back, and I always think they try and time the markets around the same time as each other. So you might see this already out there, but given the small volume we did and the different markets taking it, it might be just a hard one to get to grips with. But it might be out there already, I think.
All right. We are getting notes from one of our producers that it is in market in the States right now. So if it's in
Gotcha.
market for you guys, it is also in market for us. So everybody, if I am not going to send you down the wrong path. If you see this out there, I would pick it up. Those relationships you've been building with your favorite spirit store owner, go call in a favor and pick you up a bottle of this. Even the finish, Dave, is just like it keeps going and it's
Yeah.
going through the back of the palate like it's really working with the finish and not drying you out. It's like it's somehow you're getting a beautiful combo of dry and sweet at the same time. And then at the front of the palate is that Redbreast, like that Irish whiskey is just sitting there mid tongue. Like that is absolutely okay. I got to go online and order like a case of this. Like this is one of those. I don't want to run out. I want this to be the thing that when I want something, it's right there waiting on me. Good Lord. Wow. All right. Three amazing whiskeys. I think you have a beautifully tiered selection for us today as well, to where your daily, your day sipper, you've got Redbreast 12, consistently fantastic all the way through day to day. The 15, I think that's probably the one you know, you save it for that perfect pairing. You save it for that day where you need that extra oomph. And then the this last one we had, I don't know. I'm gonna have to really work to not let this one disappear the next time people come over, because it's one that I really want to share with others and see what they think about it, because I know what I'm getting, and my favorite part about new whiskeys is drinking it with friends and seeing what they get and kind of having that whole community go into it. So all along the way, just a fully immersive experience today, Dave. So thank you so much for sharing so many good whiskeys with me.
No, it's been a pleasure, and thanks for having me on.
Hey, anytime. I am a huge Irish whiskey fan, so if you ever want to come back and talk more whiskey with us, I am here for it, and you are welcome anytime, my friend.
No, I'd love that.
Have a great day. Cheers.
You too, Slán.